I think you have a lot of senators, especially on the Appropriations Committee, realizing what a heavy lift it's going to be to pass all 12 of those bills before the end of the year. And I think we're going to be right back here discussing all of this, come Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. I think a lot of that stuff might be interrupted because they're trying to do it ahead of the end of the year.
Welcome to Reporter's Notebook, where we talk to the Washington Examiner's top journalists about the stories breaking on their beats. I'm Jim Antle. I'm joined today by Congressional Reporter Samantha-Jo Roth. SJ, your favorite topic seems to be exhausted, came to an anticlimactic ending. Everything was fine, but then things have not been so fine since in terms of cohesiveness and ability to govern. Talk a little bit about the dysfunction that appears to be gripping the House after they got through this supposedly very difficult legislative process successfully.
Well, it's been really interesting to watch. I think, at the beginning of last year, there were a lot of concerns about how McCarthy and McConnell would work together, and that was sort of quashed at the beginning of the year. And now it's being brought back up again after, McCarthy said that there's not going to be a defense supplemental, that, senators need to adhere to these budget caps. And, lawmakers, especially on the Senate side, are very alarmed by this and very worried. Senate Minority Leader Mitch McConnell, came out several times this week saying that he does not agree with what McCarthy's been saying, but he doesn't call McCarthy out, which is interesting.
Right.
And you even have Democrats, Senator Elizabeth Warren, saying, we absolutely need to provide this Ukraine supplemental. You also have some other senators who are a little bit more optimistic. They think that, there doesn't need to be a defense supplemental until, maybe August, September, and by that time, maybe they'll be able to bring on some of their colleagues in the lower chamber who are unsure. But, it remains to be seen. You have, both sides very far apart on this.
Yeah, so there seems to be a real major sticking point over this deal, even after it's been passed, over the spending caps and how strictly they should be adhered to.
Yeah, absolutely. And also, I think you have a lot of senators, especially on the Appropriations Committee, realizing what a heavy lift it's going to be to pass all 12 of those bills before the end of the year. And I think we're going to be right back here discussing all of this, come Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's. I think a lot of that stuff might be interrupted because they're trying to do it ahead of the end of the year.
So Memorial Day weekend wasn't good enough for them?
They got to interrupt the rest of the holidays as well.
Yeah, and so in that situation, the risk will be government shutdown, right? Not default, but a similar sort of must-pass situation.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, a lot of folks do not want to see this happen. Also, the 1% across the board cuts, they want to avoid some of those if they don't get those passed by the end of the year. But this is, a Herculean, task. Like the Senate hasn't been able to do this in years and years and years to pass these 12 appropriations bills. There is a lot that goes into this, and I think a lot of the senators who are on these appropriations committees have already said that they've started the work, that they're really drafting some of the language that goes with this. But as we know, this takes a lot of time, and they realize that. The question is, are they going to be able to produce anything meaningful by these deadlines and draft the actual text? That also takes a long time too.
So Kevin McCarthy is facing a little bit of a conservative revolt in the House that's shut things down. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer doesn't have quite that much of a problem, but he does have a little bit of difficulty with the slimness of his majority, as evidenced by the difficulties potentially in confirming Julie Su as the permanent labor secretary for President Biden. Talk a little bit about sort of the problems these leaders are having corralling all of their troops.
Yeah, I mean, this is a nomination that's been on the books for, I think, since March. And I mean, she even was up on the Hill this week testifying before the House Labor Committee. And And right now, we're really just watching a few key Democratic senators, independent senators. There really can only be 2 of them that dissent in order for her to actually move forward. Senator Joe Manchin, moderate from West Virginia who's up for re-election, he has signaled that he's had some issues with her. Senator Tester from Montana, another centrist who is up for re-election, he has not said how he'll vote. And, interestingly, I was trying to chat with some of these others. Senator Mark Kelly from Arizona, who's more of a moderate, he told me he would not preview how he will vote, but he did emphasize that he has voted for her in her position that she is in now as the deputy. So maybe that could be a signal of how he'll vote. But, we've been hearing, especially from our White House colleagues, that there is a pressure campaign underway at the White House. They are calling lawmakers. They're trying to get them on board. Whether they're calling Republicans is a big question. Interestingly, we had seen some reporting that Murkowski had been the subject of some of this lobbying. And when I spoke with her today, she said she hadn't spoken with the White House for a couple of weeks. So unclear.
Right, with the outreaches there.
Yeah. What's going on with that?
So for McCarthy, the holdouts seem to be safe district conservatives. For Schumer, it's battleground state and red state Democrats who might be up for re-election in 2024. But either way, it makes it kind of hard to get to a majority.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think there's a little bit more of an understanding from Schumer. He recognizes and he gives a lot of his conference space to make the decisions that are most appropriate for their districts. But, obviously a major headache. There's stuff that's going on at the Department of Labor that has been just stuck because there is not a head that has been confirmed since Hardy Walsh left. So certainly this is something that really needs to be handled as soon as possible. And there is a sense of frustration for sure. This is somebody that they want to get confirmed as soon as possible. And I will tell you, a lot of the Democratic leaders, at least what they're projecting on the outside, is they feel confident that they're going to be able to do this. But the big question is, if they feel so confident, why has there not been a vote on the Senate floor? Schumer continues to sidestep that. He doesn't want to answer the questions about that. So we're going to have to wait and see. I think the next week or so should be pretty monumental because there's really only so much time we can wait for them to be able to move forward. But absolutely, Schumer is certainly dealing with some of these centrist Democrats who are holding up potentially this nomination and, have caused some issues even with judicial nominations and others.
Thank you, SJ.
Thank you.
You can read SJ and the rest of our political team's coverage at washingtonexaminer.com.